On November 27, 1995, a taxi driver dropped 16-year-old Ruth Wilson near Box Hill in Surrey. As he drove away, he looked back. Ruth was still standing beside the road alone. 2 days later, flowers she had secretly ordered arrived at her family home. But Ruth never did. Her bank card was never used. No confirmed sighting ever followed. And despite decades of searches, no trace of her has been found. Did Ruth go to Box Hill to disappear forever? Or was she waiting for someone who has remained silent for more than 30 years? To everyone around her, Ruth Wilson appeared to be a quiet, intelligent teenager from a peaceful English village. But beneath that ordinary life was a girl becoming increasingly unhappy and questioning secrets buried inside her own family. Then, on an apparently normal school morning, Ruth quietly changed her plans. She avoided school, traveled into Dorking, arranged a final delivery, and took a taxi toward Box Hill. After that, the trail ended. Some believe Ruth planned to escape and begin again. Others fear Box Hill was meant to be her final destination. But one possibility is even more disturbing. Ruth may not have gone there alone by accident, and the truth may depend on discovering who she expected to meet. Before Ruth Wilson became the face of one of Britain's most haunting missing person cases, she was a 16-year-old living in Betchworth, a peaceful Surrey village near Dorking. Stone cottages, church bells, and narrow country roads created an image of safety, and Ruth's family seemed to belong naturally inside it. Her father, Ian Wilson, was a teacher. Her stepmother, Karen, also worked in education. Ruth attended the Ashcombe School and had recently entered 6th form. People remembered a bright, studious, and well-mannered teenager who loved reading and music. She sang in the church choir, played the organ, and took part in handbell ringing. She was not known as rebellious, reckless, or streetwise, but Ruth did not always fit comfortably among other teenagers. Friends later described her as traditional and socially awkward. Her clothes could appear old-fashioned, and she was sometimes excluded by more confident classmates. Ruth formed friendships with girls who also felt they did not belong. To many adults, however, those struggles remained hidden. From the outside, she still looked like a responsible student from a stable home. That contrast matters, because disappearances rarely begin at the last sighting. They begin earlier in private fears, unfinished conversations and decisions that seem insignificant until someone is gone. So which version of Ruth was real? The cheerful girl seen at church and school, or the isolated teenager her closest friends remembered? A Guardian investigation later reconstructed Ruth's final weekend. On Saturday, she worked at a music shop in Dorking and ate with William, an ex-boyfriend who remained a close companion. On Sunday, she attended handbell practice, visited a youth club, and had supper at William's home. That evening, she tried on old clothes with her younger sister, Jenny. Her family remembered her laughing and appearing relaxed. Nothing in that scene looked like a goodbye. Yet by Monday morning, November 27, 1995, something had shifted. Ruth's parents left early for work. Her father was in a hurry and later remembered brushing past her while she listened to her personal stereo. His final words to his daughter were impatient and ordinary, the kind no parent imagines will become permanent. Ruth and Jenny normally traveled to school together, but just before Jenny left, Ruth said she would not be coming. Because 6th form students did not always follow the same schedule, the change did not immediately seem alarming. Soon afterward, William arrived and offered Ruth a lift. She declined, saying she would come later. She never reached school. Consider that choice. Ruth had two familiar routes into an ordinary day, her sister and William, and rejected both. She was not simply delayed. She had already chosen another path while allowing those closest to her to believe she would eventually appear. After they had gone, Ruth called a taxi and traveled into Dorking, where she spent time at the library. She also entered a florist and ordered an expensive bouquet for her stepmother. But she gave one unusual instruction: the flowers were not to be delivered immediately. They were to arrive on Wednesday, 2 days later. Why arrange a gift to arrive only after you expect to be gone? The bouquet carried no clear explanation. It could have represented affection, apology, anger, or farewell. Its meaning has been debated for decades because Ruth left no confirmed answer. By late afternoon, daylight was fading and the weather was poor. Ruth traveled to Dorking railway station and called another taxi. This time, she did not ask to go home. She gave the driver a destination on Box Hill, a beauty spot surrounded by woodland, steep paths, and open countryside. Ruth had visited Box Hill before. Friends knew it was somewhere she sometimes went after school. That made the location familiar but not harmless. On a cold, wet November evening, dressed without a proper coat, she was heading toward an isolated landscape as darkness approached. Between approximately 4:15 and 4:30 p.m., the taxi stopped near a bridleway. Ruth got out with her small bag. The driver pulled away, then looked back. She had not walked toward the path. She had not hurried out of the rain. She was simply standing beside the road. Was Ruth waiting for the taxi to disappear or for another vehicle to arrive? That became the final confirmed sighting of Ruth Wilson. Everything before it can be reconstructed. Everything after it remains unknown. But before investigators could ask where she had gone, they first had to understand that the quiet schoolgirl from Betchworth had not merely missed a lesson. She had stepped outside her normal life and left behind a trail that looked disturbingly deliberate. The moment Ruth Wilson stepped out of the taxi on Box Hill, the investigation inherited a problem with no obvious answer. Police knew where she had been. They knew how she had traveled. They knew the approximate time she arrived. What they did not know was what happened next. Search teams moved through the hill's woodland, steep paths and exposed ground. The weather was poor. Darkness had already begun to close in, and Box Hill offered countless places where a person could disappear from view. Yet the searches produced no discovery that explained Ruth's fate. Searchers recovered no belongings that could be conclusively connected to her final movements. A reliable witness never placed her beyond the roadside, and nothing arrived to prove she had left voluntarily. The girl who had created such a deliberate trail through Dorking had suddenly left none at all. At first, the runaway theory appeared possible. Ruth had skipped school, arranged a delayed flower delivery, and traveled alone to a familiar but isolated location. Those were choices, not accidents. But choosing to leave is not the same as successfully vanishing. Ruth was only 16. Her bank card was never used after her disappearance. Friends later questioned whether she had the money, documents, or practical experience needed to build a hidden life. Public appeals offered her a way to confirm she was safe without forcing her to return home. Still, nothing authenticated ever came back. If Ruth escaped, how did she remain invisible not just for days or months, but for decades? As the years passed, that question became harder to ignore and easier for the public to forget. Appeals were made, but no breakthrough followed. The case remained open, suspended between 5 possibilities: accident, suicide, abduction, murder, or a carefully planned new life. Then a retired police officer named Liam McCauley came across Ruth's story. Liam had spent years working in serious policing. He understood that missing person cases could remain unresolved for many reasons, but something about Ruth's disappearance disturbed him. Leaving home was possible. Hiding temporarily was possible. Erasing every official trace forever was something else entirely. The Guardian later reported that Liam submitted a Freedom of Information request for details of interviews conducted after Ruth vanished. Police refused because the case was still ongoing. He wrote to Ruth's parents, Ian and Karen, but received no response. Those barriers did not weaken his concern. They sharpened it. Unable to access the official file, Liam contacted journalist Martin Bright, who had written about Ruth years earlier. Martin remembered the case immediately. The image of a church-going, music-loving schoolgirl taking a taxi into pouring rain and then disappearing had never completely left him. Together, they began rebuilding the story from the outside. They had no police powers, private database, or authority to compel anyone to speak. What they possessed were archived reports, public records, local appeals, and a simple belief. Someone who knew Ruth might remember something the original investigation had failed to expose publicly. Their first obstacle was not distance, it was silence. Betchworth was a small, close community. Some residents distrusted journalists. Others were reluctant to discuss the Wilson family. Ruth's parents chose not to participate in the documentary investigation, although her father said he trusted the work would be handled professionally. That left Martin and Liam searching for the people who had known Ruth beyond the family portrait. What if the key to her disappearance was not hidden somewhere on Box Hill, but inside conversations that had never been fully heard? A renewed local appeal began to change the case. School friends came forward. Their memories did not describe a carefree teenager who vanished without warning. They remembered someone more isolated, more troubled, and more determined to leave than the public had been led to believe. One friend recalled that Ruth had spoken about going away. Another questioned how she could have survived for years without contact, identification, or a visible financial trail. The polished image of a happy middle-class home began to fracture. For the first time, the central mystery shifted. The investigation was no longer asking only where Ruth had gone. It was beginning to ask what she had been trying to escape. And the answer was connected to a truth about her childhood, one Ruth had uncovered shortly before she disappeared, and one powerful enough to change the meaning of every decision she made that day. The breakthrough did not come from Box Hill. It came from the memories of a friend who had known Ruth before she became a missing person photograph. Her name was Catherine Mayer. Catherine remembered a teenager who was not simply quiet or awkward, but increasingly unsettled. Ruth had begun talking about leaving home. Catherine was preparing to move to Sheffield, and Ruth asked whether, once she was settled, she could come and join her. This was not a fully formed escape plan. Ruth had no confirmed job waiting, no independent income, and no clear place of her own. But emotionally, she was already looking for another life. Shortly before Catherine moved away, Ruth stayed with her family. When the visit ended, Ruth strongly resisted going home. Catherine's mother later remembered how deeply uncomfortable the moment felt. Ruth did not explain what she feared. She only made it clear that she did not want to return. Then, Catherine left for Sheffield. Soon afterward, Ruth disappeared. What had happened inside Ruth's life that made home feel unbearable, yet remained too difficult for her to describe? The answer led back to her biological mother, Nesta. Nesta died when Ruth was a small child. For years, Ruth understood that her mother's death had followed an accidental fall down the stairs. As Ruth grew older, parts of that story began to trouble her. She wanted facts. With help from her then-boyfriend, Ruth began researching her mother's death. She eventually found an official record that gave her an answer she had not expected. Nesta had not died in an accident. Her death had been recorded as suicide. For Ruth, the discovery may have been devastating in more than one way. She was confronting the reality that her mother had taken her own life. At the same time, she was forced to reconsider the explanation she had carried throughout childhood. Her family later rejected the claim that Ruth's entire upbringing had been based on secrecy. Her father stated that Ruth had always known her biological mother was dead, although she had not been told the exact cause. But that distinction may not have softened the impact. Ruth now knew that one of the most important facts about her own history was different from what she had understood. Catherine remembered her becoming distressed and intensely focused on discovering what had really happened. The search was no longer only about Nesta's death. It was about trust. Who had decided what Ruth should know? Why had the full truth remained unspoken? And what else might she now question? These were not small thoughts for any teenager. For Ruth, they arrived while she was already struggling socially, feeling unhappy at home, and searching for somewhere else to belong. The timing gives her final behavior a darker emotional weight. In the days before she vanished, Ruth continued many ordinary routines. She spent time with William. She attended church activities. She laughed with her younger sister. Nothing in those final interactions clearly announced a crisis, yet private decisions were forming beneath the surface. On Monday morning, she rejected familiar routes to school. Later, she ordered flowers for her stepmother and delayed their delivery until Wednesday. By late afternoon, she was traveling alone toward Box Hill. The flowers remain one of the most haunting details. They may have been affectionate. They may have carried regret. They may have been intended as a farewell. But no confirmed explanation has ever established what Ruth meant by them. And that uncertainty matters, because the discovery about Nesta does not prove any single theory. It does not prove Ruth intended to die. It does not prove she planned to disappear permanently. It does not prove another person harmed her. What it provides is context. A 16-year-old girl had uncovered a painful truth, felt increasingly unable to remain where she was, and had begun imagining escape before the day she vanished. So perhaps the central question is no longer why Ruth left school that morning. Perhaps it is what she believed would happen once she reached Box Hill. Was the hill simply a private place where she could make a final decision? Had she arranged to meet someone capable of helping her leave? Or did a plan that began as an escape turn into something Ruth never anticipated? By the time her taxi disappeared from view, Ruth had already separated herself from school, family, and routine. But the truth about her mother only explains why she may have wanted to go. It does not explain who or what was waiting at the end of the journey. The discovery about Nesta's death may explain the pressure Ruth was carrying. It still does not explain what happened after the taxi left Box Hill. To understand that final gap, her last day must be examined not as a collection of strange moments, but as a sequence of deliberate choices. Ruth did not travel to school with her sister. She declined William's offer of a lift. She spent part of the day in Dorking, ordered flowers for her stepmother, delayed their delivery, and later hired a taxi to Box Hill as daylight faded. Nothing about that route looks accidental. The unanswered part is the purpose. One possibility is that Ruth intended to take her own life. She had recently discovered the truth about her biological mother, had spoken about leaving home, and reached an isolated area in cold, wet conditions without clothing suited to staying outdoors. The flowers can also be read as a farewell, but interpretation cannot replace evidence. Searches did not produce a body, and no confirmed trace showed where Ruth went after the driver saw her beside the road. If Box Hill was meant to be the end, why did every search fail to locate that ending? A second theory is that Ruth planned to run away. Catherine remembered her discussing escape and asking whether she could join her in Sheffield. On the day she disappeared, Ruth separated herself from school, family, and the people who understood her routine. That suggests intention. What it does not provide is a workable future. Ruth was 16. Her bank card was never used. No authenticated message confirmed that she was safe. Friends doubted that she possessed the money, documents, or experience required to create another identity and protect it for decades. A teenager can leave home alone. Remaining invisible for more than 30 years is another matter. That contradiction gives the taxi driver's final observation its greatest importance. Ruth may have been expecting someone. Surrey Live later revisited the moment Ruth was dropped near Box Hill. The article reported that the driver saw her standing still in the rain as he pulled away. It also described the possibility raised in the documentary. Ruth may have been waiting for the taxi to disappear before moving, or waiting for another vehicle to collect her. A planned meeting would explain the sudden break in the trail. Another person could provide transport, shelter, money, or a destination Ruth could not arrange alone. Ruth might have believed that person represented freedom, but the same dependence would have made her vulnerable. Whoever controlled the next journey would also control where it ended. There is no publicly established evidence proving that another person collected Ruth. She may have walked away once the taxi was out of sight. She may have entered the landscape alone. The possibility of a meeting remains a theory, not a confirmed fact. Yet it solves one practical problem the runaway explanation cannot: how Ruth could leave Box Hill without creating an immediate trail. For her family, the absence of an answer became a permanent emotional burden. Her parents made appeals and continued to hope she might still be alive. Years later, when Martin Bright and Liam Macaulay revisited the case, Ian Wilson chose not to participate. That decision did not mean the family had stopped caring. It showed how painful repeated public examination had become. The family also disputed the suggestion that Ruth's childhood had been defined by secrecy. Ian said she knew her biological mother had died, although she had not known the exact cause. Her friends, meanwhile, remembered a distressed teenager who wanted to leave and sometimes resisted returning home. Both memories can exist at once. A child can be loved and still feel unable to remain. A family can believe a home is secure, while a teenager experiences it differently. That divide matters, because Ruth's final plan may have depended on which reality she believed. Was she running from a home she no longer trusted? Was she moving towards someone who promised to understand her? Or did she reach Box Hill with no final decision at all? By the time the taxi disappeared from view, Ruth had already stepped outside every structure that normally protected her: school, family, routine, and familiar transport. The truth about Nesta explains possible motive. The flowers suggest preparation. The taxi confirms a chosen destination. But the final connection, the person, path, or decision that came next, remains missing. Until that connection is found, Ruth Wilson's last day will continue to resemble a carefully arranged escape whose ending belongs to someone else. More than 30 years have passed since Ruth Wilson stepped out of a taxi near Box Hill. In that time, the girl in the red jumper should have become a woman in her late 40s. She should have built a life measured in birthdays, relationships, ordinary routines, and choices no one else needed to understand. Instead, Ruth remains frozen at 16. The final confirmed image never changes: a teenager standing beside a Surrey road as the taxi moves away. Everything after that moment has been built from possibility. Perhaps Ruth entered the woods alone. Perhaps another vehicle arrived. Perhaps she escaped and created a life no one connected to the schoolgirl from Betchworth. Or perhaps something happened so quickly that the people searching the hill were already looking in the wrong place. None of those explanations has been proven. That uncertainty has shaped every person left behind. For Ruth's family, hope could never become relief. Believing she survived meant living with the possibility that she had chosen not to make contact. Believing she died meant accepting a loss without a body, a final conversation, or somewhere to mourn. There was no answer gentle enough to bring peace. Her friends were left with memories that changed meaning over time. A request to join Catherine in Sheffield became evidence that Ruth wanted to leave. Her refusal to return home became a warning no one fully understood. The flowers became a possible farewell. Ordinary conversations became moments to replay, searching for a sentence that might have explained what was coming. But memory is cruel in unresolved cases. It makes the past feel clear only after the person who could explain it is gone. Today, Missing People continues to list Ruth as missing from Betchworth, Surrey, since November 27, 1995. The appeal does not declare her dead. It does not claim that she ran away or that another person harmed her. Instead, it speaks directly to Ruth. The message says that help remains available whenever she is ready, that contact can be confidential, and that someone can listen, pass on a message, and help her remain safe. After more than 3 decades, that invitation is still waiting. Its continued existence captures the impossible position at the heart of this case. Investigators and charities must preserve the chance that Ruth is alive, even as every silent year makes that possibility harder to understand. Had she survived independently, how did she overcome the first days without using her known bank card or producing a confirmed trail? Had someone helped her? Why has that person never provided even an anonymous assurance that she was safe? And if Ruth died, where did the physical evidence go? The theories do not fail because they are impossible. They fail because each explains only part of the story. Suicide could explain the flowers and her emotional state, but not the absence of a body. Running away could explain the deliberate movements, but not decades without authenticated contact. A planned meeting could explain how she left Box Hill, but there is no publicly confirmed evidence identifying the person she might have met. Accident or murder could explain the silence, yet neither has been established by a discovery strong enough to settle the case. The investigation found context without finding an ending. Liam Macaulay and Martin Bright helped reveal that Ruth was not simply a contented teenager who vanished without warning. Her friends described distress, questions about her mother, and a desire to leave. That changed the public understanding of her final day. But motive is not destination. Knowing why Ruth may have wanted to escape does not tell us whether she reached safety, encountered danger, or changed her mind after arriving on the hill. One missing detail still separates every theory from the truth. It could be the identity of a person Ruth trusted. It could be a vehicle seen but never reported. It could be a conversation someone dismissed as teenage frustration. Or it could be a location searched once but never understood correctly. Whatever that detail is, time has not erased its importance. Ruth Wilson remains missing. Not officially dead, not confirmed alive, not reduced to a solved explanation. She remains a daughter, a sister, and a friend whose life cannot be completed by speculation. More than 30 years ago, Ruth appeared to arrange the beginning of a departure. Someone or something determined how that departure ended. And until the final missing connection is found, the road on Box Hill remains not the place Ruth vanished, but the last place the truth was seen. More than 30 years after Ruth Wilson disappeared, the case remains exactly where it began, at the edge of Box Hill, with a 16-year-old girl standing beside a road and no confirmed explanation for what came next. Ruth is still officially listed as missing. No body has been found. No verified sighting has proved she survived, and no evidence has established that another person harmed her. The flowers suggest intention. Her final movements suggest planning. The discovery about her mother may explain why she wanted to leave. But none of those clues reveals whether Ruth was escaping, meeting someone, or facing a decision she never returned from. Somewhere, there may still be a witness who remembers a vehicle, a conversation, or a name they once considered unimportant. If you know anything about Ruth Wilson's disappearance, contact Surrey Police or Missing People. This case required extensive, time-consuming research to examine every credible angle responsibly. The complete investigation sources and supporting articles will be linked in the description for anyone who wants to study the evidence in greater detail. Until the final missing piece emerges, Ruth Wilson's story remains unfinished.